how much more Star Wars do we need? Now, I'm certainly not about to sit here and act like I'm somehow immune to nostalgia bait, because that would be a lie. When Disney released the first trailer for the Obi-Wan Kenobi show, I was ecstatic. Ewan McGregor was always one of my favorite things about the prequel trilogy, and I could not wait to see him come back and play this character again. But then the weirdest thing happened. The show came out, and it ended up being so boring I stopped watching after 2 episodes and didn't think about it again for an entire year. Turns out bringing back a recognizable character is a pretty good way to get people to pay attention to something. But you still have to put in a little bit of effort. For one, I was shocked at how cheap everything looked. I know they didn't quite have a movie budget for this, but it's not like they were working with nothing. But it's so bland and gray and dark. A lot of the action sequences are nauseating to watch because of the artificial camera shake they threw in. What is this even supposed to convey? That the cameraman is scared? It just looks stupid. And of course the production problems could be overlooked if there was a story worth telling here, but I think they forgot to come up with one. None of the characters are interesting, including the one that should have been a slam dunk. You somehow took a character that's existed in people's heads for over 40 years and wrote him to be so flat that I can't remember a single thing he said or did in the show. There's no fear instilled by the antagonists because they're completely incompetent. The writing is inconsistent and the rules change from scene to scene. 4 stormtroopers, huh? Piece of cake for a guy like me. Oh fuck, 3 stormtroopers? I give up. Don't shoot! Damn. If only they brought a 4th guy. This also happens just a few seconds after he tries way too hard to open a gate they very clearly could have just walked around. Did that fight give him a concussion? In episode 4, Obi-Wan has to go save Leia from her imprisonment on what is described as an extremely secure base.
It's impenetrable, Wade. Suicide. You're not getting in there.
Yeah, it looks pretty secure to me. They've got an entire droid patrolling the place. Not to mention multiple doors that are unlocked.
It's impenetrable.
Okay, well, he made it into the base, but there's no way they're getting out of there. Look how conspicuous they're being. Surely someone will notice the human child hiding under his jacket. No one sees that? Are their helmets on backwards? Oh, there we go. Now they're screwed. They are completely surrounded by stormtroopers. There's no way they're getting out of this. They got away. Everything worked out. And it's not because they came up with like a strategic plan or anything. They just lowered the difficulty to easy and ran straight to the ship. This show feels like it was reverse engineered. They knew people liked this character, so they decided to make a series about him, and then it's like, we'll figure out a plot for it later on. Sure, the show came out last summer. And we're so close to figuring out a plot for it. They knew people liked Baby Yoda in The Mandalorian, so they put the baby version of a different legacy character in this show. Because why try to make something new when you've already stumbled upon a formula that works? What is this, my YouTube channel? Really, this entire series doesn't do a single interesting thing until this moment here. And yeah, this fight was pretty cool. I enjoyed it. I don't think the rest of the show needed to exist. This is like 8 minutes that are worth watching out of the entire 6-episode series. They could have just filmed this part and thrown it up on Vimeo or something. You didn't even need to bother with all that other shit. Like, what is the point of introducing Reva or any of these Inquisitors if you're not gonna do anything with them? They just act as placeholder villains until Darth Vader shows up. They don't have an arc, they're not written or portrayed in a memorable way, they're just there. Like, Reva's whole thing is he's trying to earn the trust of Vader so he'll let his guard down around her and she can strike when he least expects. Now, obviously we know that isn't going to work because Darth Vader is very much alive in the movies we've already seen, but we don't know how close she gets. Maybe she comes up with a perfect plan and everything works out until something goes wrong at the last moment. Or she has some inner conflict that hesitates and misses her chance. Like, there's so many possibilities for how this could have played out. You want to know what the final draft version of her plan was? Run up behind him again. Even if he didn't have telekinetic powers, he still has ears. How did you think this was gonna go? Why did we watch 5 episodes of this character if this is all it was leading to? What a waste of time. Writing characters that are mind-numbingly stupid is an unfortunate staple across the Disney Plus Star Wars universe. It continues to pop up in the show that I watched after this one, and the one that came out most recently, Ahsoka. Now this show is definitely better than Kenobi, but not by much. Our first introduction to the titular character is this unbelievably long scene where she's just slowly touching stuff in this cave, and things start moving around and making noise, and it's so mysterious, and it goes on for like 4 minutes, all so she can find the golden ball. And then she takes the ball, and then she tells people about the ball, and then her apprentice tinkers with the ball, and then someone steals the ball, and that's pretty much all of what episode 1 is, until the end. Oh my god, she fucking died? Alright, I'll admit it, that is a bold oath. You've established stakes, you've shown how ruthless the enemy can be, how they'll stop at nothing to get what they want. This already adds a bunch of depth to Ahsoka's character, and... what's that? She's fine?
I'm fine.
I guess it was just a minor stabbing. Sorry, it's like, I feel like people usually die from that. Relax, Obi-Wan, he's fine. Just throw a Band-Aid on it and drag him back to the ship. Okay, and it's not just that she inexplicably survived something that has killed every other character every time it's happened. It's that she's almost entirely unaffected by it. She spends like 10 minutes in the hospital and then continues about her day. If you take out the part where she got stabbed for pilot episode cliffhanger purposes, then the plot would be exactly the same. Worse though, it makes every battle going forward seem a little less important because apparently lightsabers don't kill people. So why would I be nervous watching any of these fights? Nothing the little Mia Sporran can't fix. It's not just the first episode though, this is a theme throughout the entire show. How many times are the main characters going to end up in battles where they get shot at 1,000,000 times and never get hit? It happens here, and here, and here, and here, and here, and here, and here. I know that nothing bad is going to happen to them because nothing ever does. They are invincible. And once you realize that, these scenes are no longer exciting, they're just loud. There are no stakes because the enemy is useless. Now the one thing to come out of that episode is that Sabine, the apprentice who died but didn't die, gave the golden ball map to the bad guy. And that map has the coordinates to an even bigger bad guy. So the good guys need to get that map back to the bad guys before they use it to find the other bad guy. But they also need the map because guess who else is there? Another good guy. Now I like that this premise sets up an interesting moral dilemma because they know that even though they want to use the map to find their friend Ezra, they know that if they go to the planet that both he and Thrawn, the main villain, are at, that they risk giving Thrawn a way out, something he currently doesn't have. So there's a case to be made that if they were to just destroy the map, they would be sacrificing their friend Ezra for the greater good. Because everything we hear about Thrawn is that he's like hell-bent on destroying the entire universe. So as hard as it would be to do, it kind of seems like maybe giving up on your friend would be the best thing that would save the most lives. But of course, they don't do that. Sabine is like, yeah, people are gonna die, but Ezra's my bud. And it's not just that she does this, it's the total lack of reaction from anyone else. Sabine's selfish actions would lead to yet another Star War, and no one's even a little bit upset. Wouldn't it have been interesting if when Ezra first sees Sabine, he kind of freaks out? Like, no, you can't be, you doomed the entire galaxy just to save me? I'm not worth that. What were you thinking, right? Instead, he's just like, yo, where my hug at? Remember that scene in The Dark Knight where they only have time to save either Harvey or his girlfriend Rachel, and they make the difficult choice to save him because of what he represents to the city? But instead of being relieved when he sees that someone is there to save him, his immediate reaction is anguish at the thought of someone else dying for his sake. I don't know, just thinking about that for no reason at all. I feel like everything that could have been interesting about this show is not. Like, I was so intrigued when these two came on screen and seeing how they interacted with the main character. This could have been such an interesting parallel of master and apprentice. We could have seen the similarities between these two pairs, but that's not explored at all outside of just how the fight scenes get split up. You watch the entire season and you still don't know anything about these people. I guess he's on some mission to find power and then they have to like split up at the end, but it's all so vague.
This is the land of dreams and plans. The ancient past. Long forgotten.
Sometimes stories are just stories.
There's nothing human or relatable for me to latch onto as a viewer. I would have loved an episode that's just these two, and maybe you get a glimpse into their past and see how he kind of became a father figure to her and why that relationship mattered. And maybe you could have even given her any amount of dialogue so she could have a character trait besides just brooding all the time. There's only one person on the show who evolved from the beginning to end. Sabine starts off as a rebellious Padawan who cannot use the Force at all, and transforms into a rebellious Padawan who can use the Force a little bit. How does she learn? Does she have some kind of epiphany where we, the audience, are given a reason for everything to suddenly just click? No. She can't do it, and then she can't do it, and then she can't do it, and then she can do it at the time when it was most convenient to for plot reasons. Out of nowhere, she just does something that she had no ability to do 30 seconds ago. And then another 30 seconds later, she's using the Force again to shove an adult man across a gap the size of a football field. I guess she's a master of this now. There's not a whole lot of cause and effect in this show. Things don't happen because something else happens. They happen because it's time for them to happen. When someone dies, no one reacts accordingly. To the point where I'm like, do they even know what death is? They're aware that it's bad, right? Also, why is this kid even on the ship in the first place? What is it, bring your son to war day? I've seen a lot of people try to criticize the actors in this show, but I'm really not sure how much of it is actually their fault. Like, I don't think on her own that Ahsoka is a bad character, or that Rosario Dawson is bad at playing her, because she plays her the exact same way as she did in one episode of The Mandalorian, and I thought she did really good in that. So did almost everybody. So clearly the issues seem to be more about the context that these characters are put in. In both shows, she's portrayed as this wise and powerful Jedi, and in The Mandalorian, it makes sense for her to have that air to her, because they write her to have knowledge that Mando doesn't have. He goes to her for information, and she delivers it with this sort of quiet stoicism that makes sense given the circumstance. In her show, not only is it kind of boring for your main character to talk like that the entire show, but it doesn't really make sense for her to be that calm while telling Sabine, hey, it's okay that you doomed the entire galaxy for personal reasons. It's not a big deal that millions of people will die, because at least you followed your heart. Like, no, that's fucking stupid, but that's how she delivers the line, because that's how it is written. I have more to say about this show and Obi-Wan Kenobi, but before I get more into that, I have to tell you about the Star Wars show that is so much better than both of these. It's actually hard to fathom that it takes place inside the same universe. I think if I can explain some of the things that Andor does really well, it'll do a better job of showing why Ahsoka and Kenobi are so flat in comparison. It takes like 7 minutes for Andor to subvert our expectations. Main character gets followed by a couple of antagonistic jerks. They're pestering him, they've got him cornered, they're trying to rob him. I've seen where this goes. This is where our protagonist shows off how cool and strong he is. Who are you? The name's Andor, and don't you forget it. But no, that's not actually how this goes down, because that's not who he is as a character, and that's not what this show is. In this show, he has to scrape and claw to get out of a situation like this. It's not smooth, it's brutal and messy, and in the process of trying to defend himself, he accidentally kills one of them, an act that gets treated with the gravity you rarely see in Star Wars.
He's not breathing. He's taking. He's up! Hello!
Once the other guy shifts from being pissed off to realizing he now needs to beg for his own life, holy shit!
We had a misunderstanding. We're going to what happened?
And it's important to point out that this isn't just a little action sequence to grab the viewer's attention. This is what drives the show forward. This is the impetus for everything Cassian does next, because he's now a wanted criminal. He's on the run. He has to quickly figure out how to earn enough money to get the hell out of this place. When I say that the other shows are boring, I'm not asking for more giant battles with a bunch of explosions and CGI spaceships. We've seen all that. I'm just asking for what happens on the screen to mean something. If there are no consequences when something happens, then it does not matter that it happened. If nothing else, at the very least, death has to matter, and yet Star Wars keeps trying to tell us that it doesn't. When major characters die, they're only dead until we need them to be alive again. And when minor characters die, no one around them seems to give a shit. So what's the point? No, don't worry about those guys. They're just kind of nothing.
What do you mean the people were just kind of not?
They're just like not important, like they don't matter.
We also don't need to be told about the threat posed by the Empire in this show. We can just see it. We're shown what can happen to a corrupt judicial system with unchecked power. We're shown a prison with electrified floors they can use to kill anybody for any reason. Like, the Empire actually feels terrifying in this show. These TIE fighters, which are made to be so disposable, so small and insignificant in the other movies, feel enormous when they fly by. They're loud and daunting. Their presence actually feels like a threat. In Ahsoka, we are not shown why we should be scared of Thrawn. We're told that he's this imposing force. We're told that he's an evil Grand Admiral whose escape will lead to the destruction of the galaxy, but those are just words. Words contradicted by how stupid he is in every scene. Every time he attempts to kill anyone, he fails at it. His plans keep not working, and every time he's just like, actually, it's a good thing that we lost. Now that I think about it, maybe that's why Ahsoka's so nonchalant about him getting out. It's because she realizes that he's just a bumbling idiot who painted himself blue. If you want to make the audience fear your villain, you have to show what they're capable of. Not with words, but with action. Remember this guy? That was kind of his entire thing. In fact, he was at his most feared when he wasn't talking. And unless you want them to just be evil for the sake of being evil, you have to flesh them out in some capacity. What are their motivations, their flaws, their ambitions? A great show will make you sympathize with the villain. A great show will show you everybody's perspective so you understand where they're coming from. A bad show will tell you, these guys are evil and these guys are good. And that's why they fight. Andor takes the time to develop almost all of its characters in ways the other shows simply did not. The first time Cassian's friend Brasso comes on screen, we are shown the dynamic of their relationship without one of them having to just verbally tell us. We can see the concern Brasso has when he notices his bruises, and then Cassian, without explaining himself first, starts telling him what we know to be a lie about what took place last night.
What'd you do when you left?
Cleaned up a bit and then I fell asleep.
No, we decided we were thirsty and you wanted to go to Cabos. But I said that was no good because there's too many people there I don't want.
He starts explaining to Brasso the somewhat convoluted alibi that he needs him to go along with, and without missing a beat, Brasso realizes that his friend needs his help and agrees to go along with it.
You insulted my choice of beverage. As host and provider, I'll be offended by it. You come in now to apologize.
This is a great scene because it serves two purposes. One, it tells us that what happened last night is not just going to go away, and clearly Cassian is worried about the consequences. And two, it shows us that these two people are good enough friends for one of them to put himself in danger for the other one's sake. From this, we can just assume a bunch of things about their relationship. Clearly, they've known each other for a long time. They probably have their own history of getting into trouble, but always having each other's backs. I hate when dialogue will try to accomplish the same thing by just telling you about something that happened off screen.
Cousin! There's that man whose uncle is my dad. I haven't seen you since that mission we did. The one on Corpatron? Yep, where you almost got us killed. Hey, I'm a great pilot, but I'm impulsive. And it's important we say these things out loud to each other, lest we forget.
Later on in this episode, they introduce Cyril, the Imperial deputy, who's fucking obsessed with his job. And you can see that immediately from the way he's standing, from the seriousness with which he's trying to talk, from the hilarious detail that he's taken the time to have his suit tailored.
Have you modified your perhaps slightly?
Within seconds of this man appearing on screen, you already understand who he is. What's interesting about this character, and also Dedra, a similar character who gets introduced later, is that instinctively, you kind of find yourself rooting for both of them, even though they are the bad guys. And why is that? How could it be that this asshole comes on screen in his funny little suit and I find myself sympathizing with it? Well, it's because we understand why he's doing the things he's doing. In juxtaposition with his boss in this scene, he just wants justice, but the company he's working for is telling him, no, do not investigate this murder. In fact, don't draw any attention to it at all because it might make us look bad. So even though we obviously don't want Andor to get caught, you can still look at the situation from Cyril's point of view and be like, hey, I mean, he's got a point. Like, I don't want Zuko to capture the Avatar, but once you see what he's been through and why it's so important to him, it makes him feel more human. Seeing someone who thinks they're doing something for the right reasons is always way more interesting than someone who's just vaguely evil. It's also important that these characters are written to be smart because they couldn't have gotten to where they are if they weren't. They couldn't succeed in the ways that they do if they were just giant morons our heroes could defeat without breaking a sweat. When someone comes up with a plan on this show, it is thorough. They take months to prepare for it. They have to focus on the most minute of details because the people they're fighting aren't just dumb and vulnerable. They have to find the tiniest cracks that they can slip through. And even when they plan for months and the objective is overall a success, there are still repercussions. And the Empire doesn't just shrug their shoulders and take it. They use it as an opportunity to amp up their authority. They're not invincible, but they're pretty close to it. When I was finished watching all 8 episodes of Ahsoka, I sat back and thought, what actually happened in this show? What transformations took place from the beginning of the series to the end? And it's pretty much just one thing. Thrawn got out. That's it. And sure, we're told that's a big deal in this universe, but like, we needed 8 episodes just to do that? How did does something with such a huge budget get stretched so thin? Conversely, when I got to episode 4 of Andor and he meets up with a group of rebels who tells him about their plan to pull a grand heist on the planet of Aldhani, I thought, oh cool, so this is what the whole series is gonna build up to. The season finale will be this mission. And then they rehearsed, executed, and dealt with the consequences of the entire thing by the end of episode 6. It was a 3-episode arc. I was so conditioned by the other 2 shows that I just assumed they would drag this one plot point across the entire season. But the creators of Andor knew that they had way more story to tell. You thought this part was good? No, we haven't even gotten to the best part yet. The best part of the show is the Narkina 1 prison sequence. Now, I want to be careful how I talk about this because I don't want to spoil it, but I am going to spoil it, so you've been warned. If you haven't watched this show yet and you're at all intrigued by it, go watch all 12 episodes and then come back and finish the video. But make sure you come back, because then I'll get toothy. So Cassian...
I know. I am too old to be getting this worked out over a Netflix remake of a cartoon that came out when I was 11. But this is not just any cartoon. It's not like they're rebooting Jimmy Neutron and I'm pissed off about it. Avatar is a nearly perfect series. It's one I enjoyed a lot when I saw it as a kid, but rediscovering it as an adult actually blew my mind. It's a show that moved me to tears multiple times. It's something that the creators clearly put so much thought and care into getting every detail right, from the world building to the music. Now, for a long time, I thought it would be impossible to translate this world into live action, partly because of how intricate and beautiful the animation is, and partly because the last time they tried to do it, it was a fucking disaster. I've seen way too many people say in regards to the Netflix adaptation, hey, at least it's better than the movie. Yeah, I would hope it's better than one of the worst films ever made. You don't get points for that. Because of how goofy and awkward this movie looked, I assumed it just couldn't be done. That this world was simply unadaptable to live action. And in a lot of ways, Netflix proved me wrong. This show looks probably as good as a live-action Avatar could. I mean, nothing will ever truly compare to vibrant and fluid 2D animation, but the VFX team that worked on this did a really good job of making something that very easily could have looked dumb as shit look pretty realistic. Except for the airbending, I don't know what happened there. Yeah, a lot of the scenes are directed a little jarringly, and it's way too dark sometimes. But with what they were tasked with bringing to life here, I think they deserve a lot of credit. But it's funny to me that Netflix nailed the part that I thought couldn't be done well and messed up all of the stuff that should have been a slam dunk. Let's start with the pilot, because I started writing this video 10 minutes into the first episode. The pilot condenses the first 3 episodes of the animated series into one premiere, which on paper works really well. The end of episode 3 really is where the prologue ends. We've established the world, we've introduced the characters and a little bit of their backstories, and they're literally flying away from their past as they venture forth onto their journey. And while the very beginning of the show doesn't quite reach the height that it eventually will, I think this is all paced really well and does a good job of doling out enough information to explain what's going on, while still having the restraint to hold on to something that can be revealed when the time is right. We open on 2 of the 3 main characters, Sokka and Katara. We learn that they're siblings who live in the Southern Water Tribe. Katara is a waterbender, Sokka is not. He belittles her ability, they bicker for a bit, it escalates, and then Katara waterbends so hard that a 12-year-old bald kid falls out of an iceberg. Wait, that's not just any bald kid, that's the Avatar. No one's seen him in 100 years. What the hell? No time to stop and explain everything though, because they have inadvertently alerted a nearby Fire Nation ship of their presence. This is Prince Zuko and his uncle Iroh. They've been banished from their home and sent on a now 3-year quest to find the Avatar, a quest that may just be about to end. Some chaos ensues, a fight breaks out, but ultimately with the help of his new friends, Aang is able to escape Zuko, and the 3 of them fly into the sunset. Now that brings us to episode 3, and there is still a crucial piece of information that the showrunners have not yet revealed to Aang because they're waiting until the right moment. The gang heads to the air temple that Aang grew up in, a place where Sokka and Katara know is probably filled with dead airbenders, but they don't have the heart to break it to him. And he's so cheerful and excited to just show them where he used to play with his friends. How do we tell this kid that everyone he knew and loved was murdered by the Fire Nation? Instead, they try to cheer him up and keep him distracted. We see a flashback of Aang's former life. He's talking to his friend and mentor Gyatso, someone who we can tell he clearly cared a lot about. Aang talks about how overwhelmed he is at the thought of being the Avatar, and Gyatso assures him that everything will be alright. We cut back, they keep exploring for a bit, they find Momo, a little pet to go with their big pet. Things are going great, until... oh shit.
Firebenders? You were here?
Come on, everything will be alright. Let's get at it.
This is a really important scene for the beginning of a Nickelodeon show that up until this point has been pretty lighthearted. Seeing your main character, who's just a kid, find out about the death of his entire people and then freak out and have to be calmed down by his friends. It's a really powerful moment that can only happen because the writers held on to this reveal until the time was right to reveal. So now let's talk about how Netflix handled the pilot. Instead of starting the show on our main characters, we open on an epic chase. This is streaming, baby. We gotta put a fight scene within the first 10 seconds or people are gonna turn it off and go watch Love is Blind. If you don't brutally murder someone right now, I'm taking my ass to free. But you know what? I'm fine with this cold open. I understand you're just trying to grab people's attention, and a quick little action sequence that shows how ruthless the Fire Nation can be is not the worst way to do it. But it should have ended here. You say this line.
This is about one who lives among them.
But the Avatar is yet to be revealed.
Which is why we have to kill them all.
And then we cut to present day to the 3 main characters, similar to how the cartoon did. I actually think that would have been a really effective opening, because if you've never seen the show and you just watch the Fire Lord say, we gotta kill all the airbenders, and then you cut 100 years into the future and you see an airbender that survived, you'd probably be like, how did that happen? I'm gonna stick around to find out. Instead, we come back from the title sequence, and we're still in the past on the day of the aforementioned invasion. I guess we're just gonna do the whole show chronologically, lest anyone be confused. We meet Aang and Gyatso and see them stand and talk for a while, and then we get to watch some people sit and talk for a while, and we cut back to Aang and Gyatso, and they do more standing and more talking, and then Aang flies away, and a whole bunch of murder happens. Oh my god, so much murder. I'm talking several uninterrupted minutes of murder, because remember, this is a show for grown-ups. Cartoons are for babies. We got a bunch of dead bodies in this one. What's crazy to me about this entire sequence is that while they're so insistent on showing something that I honestly think had more emotional impact to just see the aftermath of, they make no attempt to show us any aspects of Aang's personality. I mean, don't get me wrong, the writers take the time to explain Aang's personality to us. He and Gyatso tell us all about him.
I know who I am. I like to play airball, eat banana cakes, and goof off with my friends. That's who I am.
I feel bad for this kid because he seems like a very good actor, but the writers keep giving him lines that make it sound like he's about to burst into song.
You just don't even trust me to feed the baby bison. You're supposed to save the world?
Why can't I just be a kid? But this isn't even the worst example of tell, don't show that they do in this episode. Remember I told you about how Aang finds out that all the airbenders are dead, how he stumbles upon the corpse of his former best friend, surrounded by all of the firebenders it took to take him down. Here's how they do it in this show.
Most of them have just arrived at the Great Comet Festival.
The last time that the Great Comet was seen in the sky was 100 years ago.
Someone just tells him about it.
Everyone in the village knows this story. But you don't, just as you don't know that airbenders haven't been seen in generations, and that the Southern Air Temple was the first to fall because you've been trapped in that ice this whole time.
Gran reads out loud the entire opening theme for like 2 straight minutes while he has to just sit there and give reaction faces before running out of the room crying. And he's sad for like 10 seconds and then everything is fine. No time to mope, buddy. You gotta do another walk and talk. This is infuriatingly bad. You took one of Aang's most impactful moments from the beginning of the show and turned it into someone else's monologue. It's so weird to me when shows are clearly in a rush to establish as much information as possible, I guess because they think people will get confused and turn it off if they don't have their hand held through every interaction. But it feels counterintuitive. I think what gets people to continue watching something is mystery. You don't need to answer every question I have within seconds of me having it. You can reveal information in small doses and slowly add to it piece by piece. That's what's going to compel me to keep watching something, not paragraphs of expository dialogue whenever you feel like you've got some lore blanks to fill. It's also weird to me that they still try to recreate the air temple moment in this episode, even though it's not new information for Aang. He goes and sees dead Gyatso, who was evidently much easier to kill this time around, and still goes bananas and still has to be calmed down, but it doesn't really make sense because he already knows about this.
My friends, they're all gone.
It actually feels like kind of an overreaction considering he barely gave a shit about it earlier. Also in the original, Katara is the one to calm Aang down while he's in this state. She tells him that she knows what it's like to lose someone you love, but the world needs him and they're here to help no matter what. It's a great moment for the three of them because it gives closure to Aang's past while bridging the gap into this present journey they're about to go on. In this version, Katara just watches while we see a bunch of flashbacks from earlier in the episode, in case you were looking at your phone during that part.
You are my friend.
I really don't understand the obsession with Gyatso in this version. He is an important character, but more so as a memory for Aang, like a symbol of what he lost. He's not that relevant to the present-day journey they're about to go on. What matters the most is their relationship. Their friendship is the foundation that this entire series is built on. So I think you're doing a huge disservice to that by taking interactions away from Katara and Sokka Sokka so you can give them to a guy who died 100 years ago. They do this multiple times in the show. They keep bringing Gyatso back instead of giving that valuable screen time to the more important character. They even do this in the opening title scroll in the pilot episode. In the original, Katara is the one who does this voiceover, which kind of establishes the show as being from her point of view. And the very iconic lines she says at the end,
I believe Aang can save the world.
actually tell us something about her. They tell us that she's optimistic and believes in her friends no matter what. So they actually managed to add characterization into a sequence that is at its core exposition. It's a very efficient use of dialogue. In the remake, they take this away from Katara so they can, again, give it to a character who died 100 years ago. And that's not even mentioning the fact that everything that's said in this version of the title sequence gets repeated multiple times throughout the episode. It's very inefficient use of dialogue.
The Avatar, the one person with the ability to master all four elements. The Avatar, the next master of all four elements.
Only the Avatar, the one person who can master all four elements.
Only the Avatar, master of all four elements. But when the world needed most, he vanished.
When the world needed the Avatar the most, he vanished.
Episode 1 shouldn't feel as rushed at the end as it does. It's roughly the same runtime as the 3 episodes it's adapting, so it's not that they didn't have the time to tell the story, it's that they misused the time they had. They add in all this stuff that probably would have been better if it was just kept a mystery. They waste so much time repeating the same information just from different sources, and they replace interesting character development moments with vague mumbo-jumbo.
Bending is about energy and balance. Feeling the energy around you, find balance. Finding balance, feel the energy.
And what the fuck are you talking about? Remember, energy is balance, which is energy, which is balance. Whoa, thanks, Aang. I'm waterbending. Before I continue just getting mad about every single aspect of this show, I do want to answer a more general question of like, what should we expect out of an adaptation? Because it may sound like I'm trying to say that this should have been a one-to-one recreation of the original show, when that is not the case. You can and should be able to change things. Why even bother spending all this money to make something that looks worse if it's going to be exactly the same? But those changes need to enhance the story. They can't be at odds with the spirit of the show or fundamentally change a character. So that brings me to episode 2. In the months leading up to this show's release, I kept seeing aggregated quotes about it from cast members, from the creators, and every time I did, it made me a little bit less optimistic about what we were going to get. One of those quotes was how the creators of the show very nobly got rid of the sexism that Sokka had a little bit of at the beginning of the cartoon. Because that was 2005, and we're a lot smarter now. Obviously, I don't need to tell you that there are tons of movies and TV shows from 20 years ago that absolutely have not aged well. But I think you're missing the point if you try to lump this show in with those. Sokka is an overconfident but misguided teenage boy who grew up isolated from the rest of the world, where he has been tasked with being the sole leader and protector of his entire village. As a result, he begins the show with a pretty dated sense of what men and women should be expected to do. He's constantly making belittling remarks to his sister. He meets the warriors on Kyoshi Island and is relieved to see that they're just girls. Here's the thing, though. The show is not glorifying his behavior. In fact, they're very much doing the opposite. Because you know what happens right after he says these things? He is immediately proven wrong. He underestimates Suki and the rest of the Kyoshi warriors, and they kick his ass. He's so embarrassed by this that he comes back with his tail between his legs and apologizes and begs to learn from them. It is meant to be a humiliating and humbling experience for him, one that also props up the women around him. It's vindicating for Katara, who's had to deal with this bullshit her whole life, and it establishes Suki as a badass. It's not unchecked. It's not something that the showrunners are celebrating. his misogyny is immediately met with repercussions. Are we really at a point where we can't even show a character on TV doing something morally disagreeable? Can audiences truly not understand the difference between a real-life human being expressing a shitty belief and that belief being portrayed in a piece of fiction? And look, I'm not here to die on the hill, but you gotta keep the misogyny in the show, man. It was so funny. Like, there's other ways for the writers to show Sokka having a flaw that Suki can use to get a leg up on her. So what do they do instead? She walks in on him taking a bath and just fucking stands there, staring at him with googly eyes. And then in their training scene together, they have to stop every 10 seconds because of all the sexual tension.
Avoid it. We've avoided a lot of things by living the way we do.
Jesus Christ. Do you see the point that I'm trying to make here? Instead of Suki being this cool and confident intellectual superior to Sokka, who always has the upper hand on him and is always able to shut him down whenever he tries to pull some shit, they decided to just make her so horny she can't function. I gotta say, it's a little ironic that in an attempt to remove sexism from the show, they actually took a more sexist approach to designing her character. They stripped away everything that made her who she was, made her absolutely obsess over Sokka, who doesn't do anything to earn it, and then they have the nerve to act morally superior to the original writers. Also, does anyone in this village respect privacy? Shaking my damn head. On the topic of absolutely destroying strong female characters, let's talk about Katara. Her entire arc in this show is just, man, I'm not so good at bending. And then Aang is like, yeah, you are. And she's like, huh, you're right. I'm actually the best. She is not given any personality whatsoever. Her entire existence is tied to her waterbending ability, which is not what made her such a great character in the cartoon. Instead of showing how fiery and passionate Katara can be, and how her optimism sometimes backfires because the world they're living in is so beaten down, and how she can be a great leader and friend to everyone around her, not just because she's strong, but because she's empathetic and brings out the best in people. They just made her real good at fighting, and that's it.
You are a waterbender. That is who you have always been, and always will be.
And she doesn't even need any help, because she's so talented. Always has been, in fact.
I wasn't even really trying.
It's just not an interesting choice when compared to how the original show handled her growth. They had this great episode early on where Katara gets jealous of Aang because he's the Avatar and everything just comes so easily to him. But what this showed about her character is that she desperately wants to be good at waterbending, will go to great lengths to be able to do it, and has to work twice as hard as Aang. So when we get to the end of the season and she does surpass him in skill, we know it's because she worked really hard to get there. And that is more admirable than her just being handed this power. I mean, literally handed. Gran just gives her this scroll that in the original show, she went to great lengths to steal. For Katara, her main motivation in season 1 is to get to the Northern Water Tribe so she can find someone to teach her waterbending, something she's always wanted but has never had access to because she's always been the only waterbender in her tribe. And then they finally get to the North Pole, and I guess she doesn't actually need that because instead of asking Paku to train them, she begs him to let her fight. First of all, why are you asking permission? He's not gonna stop you, just go do it. What, is he gonna follow you around and tie your hands behind your back because you're trying to fight the Fire Nation? Just go fucking do it. But the point they're trying to make is that she's so powerful, she doesn't even need someone to teach her. Okay, well then why doesn't she just go defeat the Fire Lord herself? She has this line at one point where she's like, we need you, Aang. I need you. No, you don't. You don't seem to really need anyone. The fact that everything comes so easily to her makes it so there's no payoff at the end. It makes this line
You're looking at it.
kind of dumb, actually. All you did was read one scroll that your grandma gave you, and now you're a waterbending master? What a journey, huh? This story will be told for generations. They gave her zero depth in this show, and it's really frustrating. You may notice while watching this show that Netflix seems to have a fear of giving any of the main characters an unlikable trait. God forbid any of these children ever make a mistake or have a redemption arc. They need to start the show already perfect.
perfect.
That is such a boring way to write your characters. It's also a huge disservice to your actors by giving them nothing to work with. One of the foremost characteristics of Aang early on in the show is that he's still just a kid. He's a 12-year-old boy who has been given this overwhelming responsibility of saving the world. It's something that understandably scares the shit out of him, so much so that he runs away. That's how he ends up in the iceberg for 100 years. It's the inciting incident of the entire show. That guilt follows him, and it's a really important part of his growth. But Netflix seemed to be so concerned with having their main character make an incorrect decision that they changed the reason for him flying out into the middle of a storm to him just going for a stroll.
Need to go up and things.
I gotta go up where things make more sense. The ground ain't so good for thinking. Don't worry, guys, it was just an accident. He wasn't avoiding responsibility because he's a child who wasn't ready for it yet. He was just getting some fresh air. In the middle of a lightning storm. Okay, great. So instead of him showing signs of immaturity, he's actually just an idiot. Another thing about Aang still being a kid is that he's not always focused on the task at hand. That's something he has to grow into. This is his very first line in the original show.
Will you go penguin sledding with me?
He's constantly getting distracted and wanting to go on side quests because he's a little boy. Of course, it's not like that the whole show, but it gives him a starting point, so by the end, you can see how much he's matured. Netflix Aang don't got a whimsical bone in his body. He is extremely serious and solely focused on getting from point A to point B. He's not written like a child. He's already the season 3 version of it. Netflix, if you want your characters to be able to grow, they need to have a place to grow from. Yeah, he takes the time to deliver his little soliloquies about how much he yearns to do, but those are just words. We never actually see him do those things. It also makes it so his whole interaction with Boomy makes no sense. Boomy's like, there's no time for fun, Aang. You've got to go save the world. It's like, yeah, he knows that. He's already very good at not having any fun. This is one of the worst written arcs in the entire show because everything they say contradicts what they're doing. Boomy tells him to quit playing games and go do your job as the Avatar. Meanwhile, he's the one holding him hostage, giving him games to play. Aang wants to leave the entire time. Just let him go and he'll do the things you're asking him to. Aang's immaturity also lends really well to the narrative shift that happens in the first season, because for a long time he's like, yeah, you gotta save the world eventually, but first let's go here and fuck around here for a little bit. And then we get to episode 8 and the former Avatar is like, no dude, you actually have to defeat the Fire Lord by the end of the summer, because this comet is gonna come, and if you don't do it before that, he's gonna be invincible.
Mastering the elements takes years of discipline and practice. But if the world is to survive, you must do it by summer's end.
It's this great shift in momentum that adds even more stakes to the equation and puts a timer on everything. They kind of do that in this one. They give him a vision of the North Pole being attacked, but that doesn't do anything to address the overarching goal of having to learn and master all 3 of the elements. Something that, small note here, he doesn't do any of the entire season. They set that up as one of the main goals in the original first season, and we see a bunch of examples of Aang learning waterbending before having it pay off in the finale. Aang doesn't waterbend once in this version. He's so behind, it's actually stressing me out.
It would have been wise to have focused on your training.
I swear to God, if they start season 2 and Aang is already very good at waterbending, implying that there was a bunch of progress that happened off screen, I'm gonna lose my mind. And don't try to tell me that I already have. This is me on a good day. As you watch more of the show, it makes a lot of the additions more frustrating because everything has a cost. If you have to cut out character development moments so you have the space to show a bunch of airbenders getting set on fire, you might want to take a step back and reconsider your priorities. It starts to become a little obvious why the creators of the original show left this project almost 4 years ago over creative differences. According to them, they were promised that they would be given the job of guiding the show in the right direction, and they were lied to. Dude, I'm so tired of these dumbass executives who make $2 million every second getting involved in things that they have no knowledge in? Why even hire the original creators of the show if you're just gonna ignore their input and act like you know their story better than they do? Why the concern over making characters unlikable when that was never a problem to begin with? Everybody loved Katara and Sokka and Aang, even with their imperfections. Imperfections are what make characters relatable. And it's like this was all supposed to be the problem with network TV. Streaming was supposed to be the solution to this. We're not going to micromanage and enforce a bunch of arbitrary rules. We're just going to trust the showrunners to do the job that we hired them to do. Yet somehow over the course of the past decade, we've just kind of reinvented cable. So, good job, everyone. I honestly wouldn't be surprised to learn that most of the issues with this version of Avatar are the result of meddling from people who should have just stayed the hell away. Because there is potential here. Underneath all of the baffling decisions are the bones of what could have and could still be a much better series. For starters, I think they did a fantastic job with the casting. I imagine it's way harder to cast for live action than animated because not only do they have to have the perfect voice, but they also need to look the part and be the right age, and in this case, be able to do martial art. The fact that they're able to check so many boxes with these kids is impressive. I just hope that going forward, they get better material to work with. The only character they consistently write well for is Zuko. This guy's got it. He totally nails the intimidating on the outside, but a little sensitive on the inside. And between him, Iroh, Zhao, Lieutenant Chi, I think almost all of the Fire Nation scenes were more cohesive and well written than anything that the rest of the cast was forced to do. Going back to my point that you can and should be able to make changes in an adaptation if they make sense, I thought a couple of the additions they made to Zuko's character worked perfectly. One, there's the reveal that the crew Zuko protected from being sacrificed in the meeting that led to his banishment is actually the same crew that he's been commanding for the past 3 years since then. So I thought that was a really cool way of tying everything together. It makes so much sense that I was actually surprised when I went back and rewatched season 1 of the animated series and realized they didn't do that originally. I also like the scenes they added with him and Iroh, like the flashback to Iroh's son's funeral where we see Zuko give him his condolences as well as a gift to remember his son by. They have another moment like that at the end of this episode where Zuko is about to set off on his never-ending quest on the Avatar and Iroh's like, hey, mind if I come along? And Zuko's pretty resistant to the idea, but then Iroh says this.
Everything I know is on this boat.
It's a very sweet moment, especially with the little nod they do to Leave from the Vine, a famously sad episode from season 2. But I do think it's worth pointing out that this only works for the people who have already seen the entire animated series. This only has the emotional weight that it does if you're going into this show with 30 hours of content. Keep in mind, this is episode 4 of the live action. If this is your first exposure to these characters, this moment is not going to have nearly the same significance. It's nice, but it feels a little premature. Netflix Avatar has an instant gratification problem where they don't want to set anything up that can be paid off later. They just want that payoff now. And I get that some of that was probably due to the uncertainty over whether they would even get a season 2 and 3. So they were trying to be as impactful as they can with this first season, but it's only going to make their job harder in the future. Like, where do you even go with some of these characters? There was one big change with Zuko that feels emblematic of the entire philosophy they approach this show. There's an episode in season 1 of the cartoon called The Storm, where we see these juxtaposed flashbacks of Aang and Zuko's past, and we learn about the moments that sent them on the trajectories they're now on. For Aang, it's running away from home, and for Zuko, it's getting banished from home. He speaks out of turn in a war meeting and disrespects everyone in the room by saying they should come up with a better plan. Ozai does not appreciate this, and he tells Zuko that he's going to have to do an Agni Kai, aka a firebending. But when Zuko shows up, he is shocked to find out that it's not the general he's supposed to fight, it's his own dad. Zuko begs not to have to fight him. In fact, he outright refuses, but this only makes Ozai more angry. Zuko has now
Threat level only. returning to the anomaly. the anomaly. That's it. Signal's gone. I'm alone again. Left to focus on what I still have. My research. My revenge. Message in abeyance loop transferred to anomaly. Destination incomprehensible. This message was not authorized.